a lot of things that I'm going to talk about is from the learning that I had in those 7 years where I got a chance to meet some of the brightest or the best salespeople. And I got trained by some of the best and some of the best practices all around. Before I start talking about like get into this, I just want to share two perspectives that I've heard and which has sort of shaped the way I think about sales or how has it been, right? So the first perspective where it says job of a salesperson is not to sell, but to solve a problem. Now, when we are selling, there are two parties here, right? One is us, and the second is the buyer or the prospect. When like more often than not, or I used to initially think about, hey, I have to go sell the product. I have to convince them that this is really good. But then when I read this, I think, oh, and this changed my perspective completely because it says I do not have to put myself or my product at the center, but I have to put the customer and their problem at the center. I have to put myself in their shoe, try and understand what is the problem that they have, and how can me or my product solve that problem. And once I started thinking that way, it changed the whole thing for me in terms of how do I go about preparing for the meeting, how do I go about continuing my conversation, and eventually how do I end up closing my discussion. So this has been like a really impactful statement for me. The second, which is something what I came across like a few months back, where it says more than half of the sales discussion end up resulting in no purchase. Now, and there can be various reasons for it. It can be that hey, the company was just trying to see what this technology can do. In a lot of complex sales, there are a lot of people who get involved in decision making, and there was no consensus, and probably the sale sort of fell through. It can also be that the company did not see value in the product. But if you look at it, the onus still lies with us now, right? As salespeople, to understand what is the value, what is the definition of value for that company is, and try and see how can we convince them that we can solve their problem. So in both the statement, it sort of brings back the focus on how do we go about leading our conversation. This is what a typical B2B sales process looks like. I'm hoping most of you will agree this is how it looks. So in a normal process, what we do is we prospect, we do call outreaches, in mails, emails. We get a lot of inbound requests from companies. We prospect, we set up the meetings. When the meeting is set, we go in the meeting, we qualify, we try and understand what are the problems, try and position our product. Once that is done, we go send out the proposal. And of course, there are multiple loops in between proposal and negotiation. When the negotiation happens, we get that elusive win, we close the deal. And once a deal is closed, we then work with the customer to showcase value, continue to make sure that they see value, and then they renew with us, right? So that's how it like if it's a typical sales process looks like. And while there are various and multiple skills which are at play when we look at this process, there are two large skills that I want to focus on, right? Number one, which is for the bottom four part, is perseverance. And I cannot fall short of telling the importance of perseverance in the entire sales process or as a skill that all of us in sales should have. And just to give you an example, when I joined LinkedIn in the first quarter, I started working on a company which I eventually closed 6 months before I was leaving LinkedIn. So it took me 6 years to close that particular account. And it wasn't just me who was working on it. I had colleagues who were working on it a few years before I joined LinkedIn. So it took a lot of time to close that conversation. So it's not just 1 hour conversation, it happens a lot of times. So it needs a lot of patience, not just from the employee standpoint or for us, but also company needs to be a lot of patient about something. So perseverance is really important. But I'm here to talk about what is the skill that is required for the first two part of the sales pipeline. The skill that I want to talk about is curiosity. And how does it sort of help in the first, helps in setting up the tone of the conversation that we are going to have with the customer? Because during the prospecting stage and qualification stage is where we can showcase the value that our product will bring to the customer. We can ask all the questions, difficult questions. We can build the trust with the team, with the ecosystem, right? For us to then try and closing that deal and deal at the value, which essentially adds to the whole ecosystem for us. So curiosity is something what is really, really important in the first two parts. Like when we start discussing with a specific set of organization. The first thing, like whenever we get into meeting with any company, think of it as it as an opportunity for us to solve a problem. Again, when somebody is ready to talk with you, they might have something that they want to solve for, right? So think of it, how can we solve it? It's an opportunity for us to solve a problem for a new company or for a person. It's an opportunity for us to showcase our thought leadership, where a lot of time, by the way, people do not even realize that it's a problem that they can solve for. It's a problem that they have, which similar companies in their industry are not facing. So it's again is an opportunity for us. And as salespeople, we are sort of privileged because we have so much of conversations, right? Day in, day out with companies in different industry, different geographies, using some of those knowledges to have much better conversation with the next prospect. So it's an opportunity for us to showcase our thought leadership. It's an opportunity for us to listen and learn something new, that again, which we can use in our future pitches, which we can use in the way we approach things professionally and personally as well. It gets really, really amazing, right? If we approach our meetings that way. And if we do all of these things, a meeting is also an opportunity to earn the right to ask the deeper question, because that is where we understand how are they thinking about the problem that they have, right? We cannot directly on the first call or straight up go and ask, hey, what's your budget, or what's the sales process, or things which can be a little more difficult for somebody to answer without they knowing you well enough. But once we've established the trust, once we've showcased that, hey, we mean business, we can then ask deeper question, and trust me, people will not have any issue in terms of answering those questions for you, right? And something what is very important for us to remember, that typically sales win rate is 5 to 20%. I'm giving out a wider range here because in different industry it can be very different. But the point is, we end up winning, we end up losing more deals than we win typically, right? But we have to think of it like we either win or we learn, because every deal that doesn't close for us, we learn something that we can use in our next conversation. We learn something that we can use in our pitch. We learn something that we can use in the similar company, in the similar industry, and try and close somebody else. So it is something what it like, which is very important and something what we need to approach meeting at. And hey, this is not just the problem that salespeople have. It's a problem that pretty much everybody has. And um, like something what the the goat of basketball, or for a lot of people across the world, he's the greatest sports person ever lived. This is what he said, that I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career, lost more than 3,300 games, lost games 26 times when my team when my team trusted me to take the final shot, and he failed over and over and over again, and that's why he succeeded, right? So it's about what is it that we learn from things when it doesn't go right for us, and how do we inculcate those when the conversation is going right, because it's not about winning everything, but it's about when we are winning something, are we winning it at the right value, and are we winning with the right intent. So that is what is very important. Now, again, two aspects to this, right? Number one being, it is always given that you will know or you should know everything about the product and the services that you are selling, right? All the features, everything that's happening within the company, right? So that is always given. My focus here is to understand, or how do we prepare on the other side about how do we try and find out more about the customer, right? And there is a very simple framework that I use, what we call as a 3 by 3 framework, right? And these are the three things that I, every single time that I go for a meeting, I try and find out about. Number one, try and find out about the industry of that company, right? The second thing that I want to find out about what's happening within the company. And the third, all the people that I'm going to meet in that, on that conversation, and also try and find out about all the information about who can be potentially important person for me in that conversation, right? So these are three things which are really, really important, which sets the base for us as a thumb rule or as a way to sort of understand more about the company. Now let's get into one by one as to when I say industry, how do we go about it, right? The first thing that I do when I want to research or something what has been the biggest source of information for me has been our newspaper. It's a huge source of information because we not only get complete perspective of what's happening in the business section, but also political, all of that. And there are so many things which impacts a specific industry. Like you would know, recently government uh, just proposed a taxation on all the online gaming companies, right? And that just changes a lot of companies. If somebody in sales was trying to close those deals, becoming more and more difficult. So knowing how something can change, it is really important for us to understand. So one, I religiously read newspaper and get a lot of information around that. The second thing that I do is I lead a lot of reports. Now reports can come from a Gartner or come from a lot of institutes, right? Government institutes or a lot of consulting companies who release a lot of reports around industry, around specific companies, around specific trends. I also listen to a lot of talks by the leaders, right? Which is there on YouTube, through podcast, on LinkedIn website, right? So on and so forth, which again help me build that insight about what's happening within the industry. The third thing is I try and apply this framework called PESTLE. Now, in PESTLE, like each word signifies a word. So P stands for political, right? So today we know there is a war going on in the Middle East. Now, that does impact certain industry a lot more than some other industry. So knowing that this can change the business, it can have business impact in a certain company that you're talking with. It's really important for us to know, right? T stands for technology. We know generative AI is impacting every industry in a specific way. So how is that impacting, let's say, a software services industry versus a financial industry? It's really important for us to understand, read, because it can lead to some really interesting and important discussions for us. So these are some of the things that I do to prepare or get more information on industry. Then I go about preparing or researching more about the company. Of course, like no prizes for guessing. The first place that we go or I go is on the website. I read about the about a section on the website. I go through all the blogs that they have, where they release about the new trends that they're working on, all the information which can be really interesting for us to have conversation with, right? Second thing that I do is I go on LinkedIn, type in the company name, go through the posts that the company is posting on LinkedIn, and more often than not, companies have started using LinkedIn very, very aggressively. So when I was at LinkedIn at the start of my career, um, at LinkedIn, we had limited number of companies or the awareness within Indian market about what LinkedIn can do was not that much. But now pretty much every company uses LinkedIn very, very religiously. And as a salesperson, it's very important for us to understand or go through those. Like imagine a company celebrating their 10th anniversary. And then they put the employee pictures. It's a great news that we, or a great information that we find. And imagine if you have call with somebody tomorrow The first statement that you can use that, hey, congratulations for raising your Series B funds or for celebrating your 10th anniversary or any other milestone that company is celebrating. It's just about helping us to break that ice. And the third thing that I do while researching about a company is go to Google, type the company name, and click on the news tab. That again gives me enough information about anything recent that's happening in the company or why were they in the news. Typically, like, and with the recency effect, it always helps in terms of having a really good conversation or letting the people know that, hey, we know about you, we know about your company, and build that trust, right? And the last thing is about researching on the people. Again, I go read and research about those people, check their profile out, check what is it that they posted, all of those on LinkedIn, right? I also go on other social media, try and see, are they on Twitter? Are the CXOs on Twitter? What are they posting? Any information which can help me to know more about them, about their company, and which will help me for my conversation, right? And a lot of time, companies also post some of the key employees on their website. And if you end up finding that person on the website, do make sure you somehow bring that up in the conversation because it's always really good, right? So again, two parts to preparation, right? Knowing about you and your company, very, very important, everything that we do. But this is how we prepare for the customer to know more about the customer. This is how we prepare for the two perspective that I talked about initially, right? This is how we end up preparing or putting our best foot forward for the meeting to have really, really good meeting. And it's a process that I'm talking about. It is really, really important for us to set and something what we need to do day in, day out. And somebody really popular talked about process. And I think all of us will associate or relate with that person and what he just says. So MS Dhoni, he talks about the process is the most important, is more important than the results. And if you take care of the process, you will get the results. So if you think of it, putting this in the perspective of selling, at the end of the day, it's about how do we go about preparing for a meeting? How do we go about preparing to add value to a customer is really, really important. Because if we are able to do that, we will get the deal, we will win the deal, and we will win the deal at the right value. Something what is really, really important, right? I've been talking a lot about trust. I've been talking a lot about preparation. But whose trust are we talking about, or whose trust am I referring to? And why does it matter? When a deal is closing, it doesn't happen in front of you, it happens behind you. If the deal is closing or not closing, anything that happens goes behind us. We are not aware about it. So, what we need to do, it is really important to build the trust and for us to have a champion in the company, because when we are not in the room we still need somebody who represent us in the company, right? And that person is going to be our champion. So by the everything that I talk about here, right, the research that we do, the preparation that we do, the value that we going to add about or we want to talk about, it is to showcase value to the people who are going to be in the meeting and to make somebody our champion, because champion is the one who is going to talk on our behalf when we are not in the room, and that champion is the one who's going to be advocating about your solution, right? Like in a lot of organization, selling, while you'll sell to that, like your persona, CFOs can take a call, right? A lot of engineering team will take a call. So we need somebody who navigate through all of these things, advocate our solution, and that's going to be a champion. He's the one who's going to take us to different people. He's going to who's going to help us in terms of understanding what else do we need to do, right? He's the one who's going to they are the one who will be helping us in terms of who else should we reach out to, how do we have conversation with them, right? They will give us enough insights about their own organization which will help us to curate our offering, or which will help us to position our product in a specific way where we win, and at the same time the champion also wins. right? They are the people who will influence the sale because they are the one who believe that we are the team or we are the company who will solve the problem that they have at hand today, right? And they will help us to accelerate the sales because at the end of the day, we have quarterly quotas, half yearly quotas, annual quotas, whatever that can be. Right? There are various things that can change. The pricing can change next year. A lot of time companies might or might not believe when you say, hey, my pricing is going to increase. But the champion will believe because he is trusting you and we are trusting them. So it's about having somebody who knows that they will win if we win and they will win if they win. That is the most important thing for us, right? So this is where it all culminates into, guys, right? And all the preparation that we have to do, all like putting customer at the center. It's about we have to put our champion at the center and make sure that champion wins because if he or if they win, we win. And not seeing value, our champion can let us know upfront, saying, "Hey, Piyush, my team do not see value. Maybe it's right time for you to reach out to us 6 months later when we have more budget or when we will start thinking about things that your company is trying to sell us." So what we do is we save time, we continue to build equity with them, and then reach out to them later on. And it has happened with me multiple times, right? uh, where a champion has told me, has given a timeline. I had a specific timeline. They told me that, hey, it will not close. You'll have to be more patient with us because you'll have to navigate through this, but work with us and we'll get you there. And then that's what we did. We worked together and then we end up closing some really, really significant deals, right? So this is where it's all about. All the preparation sort of comes together. How curiosity can help us to continue to improve ourselves, right? And how do we keep learning? And I will just share a few ways that I keep looking at it or something what I do very, very religiously here, right? The first thing that I do is I evaluate myself like very regularly, and I do that like again in sales we live quarter by quarter by quarter. So this is what I do at the start of every single quarter. Hey, how did my last quarter go? What is it that worked right for me? What is it that didn't work for me? I use a simple framework, which is start, stop, continue. So I try and understand what is it that's going right for me that I should continue. What is it that's not going right for me, which I should stop? And what is it that something that you need to start doing, right? What I was not doing last quarter or quarter after that, or I stopped about a year back that I need to bring it again, right? So it is really, really important for us to continue to evaluate. You can set up a timeline for yourself as to when you want to do, because one of my manager had told me this, which stuck with me forever, that Piyush, what got you here is not going to get you to next level. So we need to always think of the way we're going to up our game. And that's going to happen being curious about our own progress, our own goal, because again, that's how we'll add more value to someone else. That is one. The second is, and yeah, I'm sure all of you might be thinking that, hey, he's talking a lot about LinkedIn. And just to tell you again, this is not because I was at LinkedIn, uh, but LinkedIn has become really, really important part of my entire progress. So here I'm talking about LinkedIn from the perspective of following the right people, right? Not about researching something, but following right people. We're following right thought leaders. So we can follow a lot of people who are in sales or a lot of leaders who post amazing things on LinkedIn. I follow a lot of companies who post a lot of things which helps me a better sales person, right? So following right people, following the right companies is really, really important. And this is from the perspective of self growth, right? Learning, like taking a lot of courses. And some of the, like, we can take courses from LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Udemy, or any other thing, right? I'm sure a lot of your organizations will have a lot of platform where you'll have various learning modules. Just make sure that we are always learning, right? And we don't necessarily have to learn something new every single time, but it is really important for us to being reminded about some of the things which we sometimes take it for granted, or sometimes we know that, hey, we know this, but we tend not to apply those in our conversation and in our day-to-day life. So continuous learning. Again, you can set up a calendar for yourself saying, hey, I'll spend 4 hours every week, every month, 10 hours every quarter, however that sort of suits you, your schedule. But it's really important that we always focus on learning. Um, this is something what I've started doing very religiously now over the last couple of years is listening to podcasts. And there are some amazing podcasts about and what podcast does is that it allows us to listen to somebody sitting anywhere in the world, right? So I use a lot of Spotify to listen to podcasts. Like I'm very interested in terms of how our company is building, how what was going in their mind when they were starting that company, how did they navigate through this? So I listened to this podcast called Acquired. Have a look at it if that interests you. It's amazing the way they do. I listen to a lot of sales podcasts, a lot of podcasts on new technology. Um, which again I can use in my conversation personally and professionally at the same time. Books. I'm sure everybody here does that, but yeah, reading books, having a target in mind. And that is something what I've started doing a lot from the start of the year because earlier I never used to have a target in terms of how much like how many podcasts or what will I listen in terms of hours or how many books should I be reading in a year. But now I've started putting out a number to that so that I know like it's just a chase that I've created because I've realized that's how my mind works sometimes. And it always helps me to get back to that habit. So I make sure I read a book, like at least 2 to 3 books every quarter. And yeah, I'm on track for this year so far. So yeah. And yeah, the last but not the least, continue to uh, read what is your competition doing, right? In terms of, so let's say if you are in like an ed tech company, try and understand what are other ed tech companies are doing. What are some of their wins? Go through their case studies, go through all of these things, which again will help you to understand how can you pitch better. Um, how can you build a narrative which can be very different because you might be adding those values as well, but something that you can change, something that you can continue to tweak and improve your pitch and improve the way you look at things from there, right? So these are some of the things that I do very religiously and something I just wanted to share with everybody here, right? And yeah, the last but not the least, as they say, curiosity killed the cat. But just remember, curiosity is the best friend of salespeople. We just have to understand how do we implement it day in, day out, and how do we build curiosity as a muscle? Because once we do, everything else will take care of itself. When I got into sales, or what my initial idea about sales was that, hey, it is for people who are extrovert, who are very outgoing, all of that. But that changed drastically once I got into sales because I've seen some of the best salespeople are absolute introverts. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day because everything that I was talking during my session, it was all about having the mindset of problem solving. That is very, very important. Most of the B2B selling and what we now call as consultative selling, right? It is about understanding somebody's problem, try and see how does my product or solution fit in that, and how will they succeed. So if you have that sort of mindset, uh, that helps us a long way because we're not doing selling, transactional selling where somebody buys and then they won't see you again. If you want to sell or if you want somebody to use your tool again and again and again, it is really important that we've added value to that person. So understanding what value is and having that mindset is something what is very important. And again, the 2 skill that I talked about in my presentation, perseverance, like being patient about it, being patient with yourself, being patient with learning. Like sales, we see uh, more losses than wins, right? So it's very important for us to keep ourselves calm. It's really important to believe that it's fine, it happens, take it on the chin, wake up next day, fight another day. So it's really important. So having that perseverance and again curiosity. So these are the things which are really, really important. Something what I keep working on always. and other traits I feel are important. Like while like a lot of sales tool is that different companies will provide to different people. So I'm not going to get into those, but I'm going to talk about something what everybody has. It's just about how do you use it. So again, can't fall short of recommending LinkedIn and using LinkedIn in a specific way, right? Which is very, very important. Like for like I talked about following right people. So important. Imagine you read and people put something which you can read within a minute, and it's epiphany about, hey, this is also possible, right? And being that is something, using that, it's very, very important. I talked about like Google using news. Using Google itself, it is so helpful in terms of understanding so many things, preparing well for the meeting, right? So that is another thing what I will absolutely recommend um, for us to use. So it's not about new tools, but it's just about figuring out how do you use that effectively. um like in your organization, if you have like a top salesperson, going talking to them, hey, what is it, how did you close this deal, what is it that you do, like understanding what is it that they do different. So like what you'll realize over a period of time, that people don't use different things or do things like have like use different or lot many more tools. It's just about what we have, how do we use it differently is something what is really, really important. And understanding that quarter on quarter, the self-evaluation that I talked about is something super duper important, super critical to sort of use. I follow a lot of people, but I can just um tell you like I follow the sales guy. There's a page called the sales guy, and and they put a lot of memes which are very funny, but then it starts the day on a very lighter note, and it always helps. They put really amazing content there. So that's one thing that I follow. The founder of the page, I um I forgot his name. His surname is Disney, though. Like he again posts a lot of things. He was the one again about a few years back posted about salespeople should not be selling but solving problem, and he wrote a really good article. You should go check that out. So I would recommend following that page. Following Gong, that's another company that you can follow. And there are a lot of leaders from Gong who post amazing content on LinkedIn. So you can then follow those. Um, the CEO of LinkedIn, he posts a lot of amazing content on LinkedIn. His name is Dan Shapiro. So that's another person that you should for sure follow. Within Indian ecosystem, like we had one of our leaders within LinkedIn, Tariq Ahmed. He posts a lot of content on LinkedIn and really amazing content on sales. Really, really great thought leader. Um, so yeah, you can like follow these people. To tell you frankly, the people that I follow, they comment a lot on the other sales thought leaders. And if I like some content, I start to follow them as well. So I keep doing that more and more and more. And I keep getting more and more information from them. So it's not about like a person eventually, to be honest, but it's about continuously sort of going. And then once you built out a list of people, or once you start to follow a few people, you'll start to get exposed to a lot many more people on a daily basis that you can start to follow. Look, what happens with targets are typically at the end of the quarter. Imagine somebody who is just at 50% and you just have a week. By default, we are not in the best frame of mind at that point in time, right? Like how we are as a person in a difficult situation, it gets very, very difficult, right? Like like if I just draw a parallel with cricket, when somebody's chasing 200 runs versus chasing 350 runs, the mindset of that person changes a lot. Everybody like scored 50 runs, 70 runs, 80 runs when we are chasing smaller target. When chasing high target, or when we are chasing 100 runs in 7, 8 overs, it's a very different skill set that we need. So we need to, it's important to keep calm at that point in time. And that's where I've always appreciated someone like Dhoni, where he talks about process. So what I always try and do is, my intent was always that, okay, break the number. So if I had, let's say my target is to bring 100 this quarter, I always try and work in such a way where by the mid of the quarter, I should be done with 75 ideally, right? So I always want to put in effort upfront, as much effort upfront as possible, because that's where we have minimum pressure. That's where we are uh, in the best frame of mind. So that's where I want to put in more and more and more effort, because at the end of the quarter, I might behave somewhere. I might get desperate to close that deal. I might lose certain deals because I've been too pushy. And it gets very naturally to all of us. As much as we do not want to be that person, it does happen. So the best way is to understand that it happens and be as prepared as possible. So what I used to do, or what I typically do, is try and close my quarter ideally in the first 2 months. Now think about it. You started, like your quarter started, think from the next quarter. Jan 1st is when your next quarter starts, right? If you try and close that quarter in the first 2 months and put all the effort that you have in the first 15 days to 21 days, all the prospecting that we have to do it very upfront, because you know that to close a deal, it takes a month. So if there is any new conversation that you are having starting March, you're not going to close within that month. You'll be lucky if you are able to close. So knowing all of those nuances, you have to have all the conversation starting, or starting at least by mid of the year or mid of the quarter for you, right? Which is by 15th of Feb. So knowing that you have to do heavy lifting upfront, that is very, very important. So thinking about or planning to close your first quarter in 2 months, and imagine if you are able to do that. And I would do that a lot at LinkedIn or something, where I keep trying that. Start of March, that's when I start to think that, hey, my next quarter is going to be from March, April till June end. So again, that is what my mental framework used to be, that, hey, now my next quarter is still, let's say, 3 months, but it starts previous quarter, which other people do not know. Other people do not need to know about it. That's my mental framework. And that's how I used to lead it. It's about doing heavy lifting upfront, so that we are able to close the right deals at the right time. And we do not necessarily close something short. So if you know a deal can become really big, we have to be patient. We be that, right? Work with them and close it at the right value for you. Like one is to ask why, back to that question. So somebody asked that, hey, you are too expensive. Like asking, why do you think so? And how are, like, what is it that you're comparing us when you say expensive, right? So it is important that, like, objection handling is a great way for us to understand more about what are they thinking, get more information as well, and then answering that. So like the easiest thing, and it happens with everybody, where we go defensive when somebody do that. But it's a skill that we need to continue to work on. But it's fine. Objection handling is a great way for us to convince that person that, or change the mind or the thought process of that person, that it's like, while they're right in thinking of things in a specific way, that, hey, yes, we are expensive, we can be expensive, but we are able to solve a problem which can be much bigger for you. So which is essentially saying that we'll be able to deliver value proportionately to that, or a much bigger value to you. So it's all about ROI and not just about price point. So asking back, why do you think so, right? Or having things about that, hey, this is not the first time that I'm hearing this. The company that I closed last week had the same objection. But then this is what we realize in terms of what are we trying to solve for. So knowing things about your product, knowing things about having the right set of information, but at the same time asking back, like asking why to them, is very, very important. And I would actually suggest or recommend a book around, there is a Never Split a Difference. It's a book which I would highly recommend in negotiation. Like, it is written by a person who was negotiator, would be one of the best negotiator in the world. He's done a lot of negotiation for the US government. His name is, I think, Dan Voss, if I'm not wrong. Um, really, really good book. He lays out a lot of amazing frameworks and ideas in terms of how we should do that. And a technique that he talks about, which is mirroring and all of it, really helpful in terms of objection handling. Look, again, like various ways to look at books. So, Never Split a Difference is one book that I would absolutely recommend. Another book which I read on like about year and half back, which was Challenger Sales. Like it talks about a very different methodology of sales, right? And then they back it by a lot of research and examples. For sure, we should read that. I also think sales is a lot about psychology, right? It's not just about that, hey, going selling. It's also about understanding. So there are a lot of books around like thinking fast and slow. Now it's a very deep book. It's a huge book, but I really like that, and I try and use some of those approaches in my like daily life, in sales, all of those. So books like those, books around how some of the amazing companies have been built, like on thought leadership. So like books, Steve Jobs' book, right? Jobs. That's again really good book that I really enjoy reading. Learned a lot now. The same author has written a new book on Elon Musk right now, which I'll probably read very soon. But it's about building the holistic perspective, right? From the sales standpoint, it's not just about reading books around just sales, but like I said, psychology in terms of how leadership sort of things. So like picking all of those books which are of your interest are really important. Like it can be self-help books, biographies of people. So there is this book called Good to Great, really good framework that is has for us in terms of how can we approach certain things, or how companies have gone from good to great. So yeah, like a lot of books to recommend, but I would rather talk about, not just look at purely from just sales standpoint, or books that just talks about sales framework, but look from all the other angle, because selling, again, like I said, needs a lot of skills. We talked about curiosity and perseverance. There can be a lot of books around that we can actually read. A lot of thing is what I've summed up here, and it's all part of my learning. And I've been like very fortunate to have worked with amazing managers, some really good salespeople who I could call up, learn people in action in terms of how they're closing such bigger deals. What is it that they're doing? What is it that they're doing different? What is it that I can learn? So I've always approached my sales process with absolute curiosity in terms of, I just want to be better. What I'm today, I want to be better next quarter, better quarter after that. So for that, I need to be on top of certain things. I need to be reading things. I need to be working. I need to be talking with people. And that's something what I continue to do always. And I've approached my sales exactly what I was talking about. It's all about, and it took me some time. So I started my journey at LinkedIn as SD, and I work with the best salespeople there, who were my like the sales managers who I was supporting. That role gave me great insight in terms of how some of the really top people who are 10 plus years of experience then doing enterprise sales, how do they think about selling? How amazingly they go about selling? How do they go about putting those hard yards? So my training got done by some really amazing set of people up front, and I use that to my biggest advantage. because nobody can take that away from you, or very few people get such exposure at the start of their sales career. And I've always believed in one, adding value to every single conversation. So that has always helped. Number two, um, never like you might lose some really big deals, or you might win a really, really big win. You might have a really massive win. Um, it's great to celebrate and it's great to sulk around, but remember, like at the end of the day, have those controlled emotions, right? Like we can have bad quarters, and that's absolutely fine, very natural. Or you can have really bad days on a daily basis. Like think about, again, if I just have to draw a parallel, Virat Kohli, who is the most consistent batsman in ODI, he is averaging 58, 59. But if you look at, probably he's averaging 50 plus, right? But I think he's scoring 50 every 3 or 4 matches. So he doesn't get 50 every single match. But it's about when he gets a 50, he makes it count. And that is what is important. So take it on the chin. If you have a bad day, it's fine. But how do you regroup? How do you continue to work with people? How do you continue to upskill yourself? And that's something what I've always been focused on. Um, and that helped me. So and from club perspective, at the start of the year, I would never think about like going to club, but I would have my own target. I would think about club only in the last quarter. For the first 3 quarters, I would have my targets about how do I approach sales. Like one thing I talked about, I would always think about closing my quarter in the first 2 months. So if I'm able to do that, then I would have target about closing my year in let's say 9 months or 3 quarters, and then accelerating there. So I would have many targets, many milestone, and I would keep evaluating how am I doing against that. Am I behind that? If I am, then what is it that I need to do? And I was very relentless in terms of how to go about prospecting, how do I go about doing more and more and more meetings. So that had become my second nature at that point in time. And yeah, helped me then and helping me now. So once we've done a meeting, the follow up, what we do becomes fairly standard in terms of what we do there, right? Because we share the MOM of the meeting, we share all the information. But every time I finish a conversation talking with somebody, I always try and set the next steps on that conversation. So if I'm talking or if I'm doing a meeting today, I always try and understand that, hey, how does the next step looks like for you? And when can we connect again? And what is it that you would like to know further from here? Right? So once we've established that, how did this conversation go? And what is the next step? That becomes a cadence for us to follow with that person next time. And we're not just blindsided by what the next step is going to be, right? So use that very religiously to have have a goal for the next meeting set up already. For most of the meeting that I do, I always end up sending out a calendar invite to them, having that conversation set up. And in between, I continue to follow with them, either do a quick call. If there is anything interesting that I find out, I try and send out an email about it. The intent remains that I have to keep my prospect warm, right? Now, I can do that by sending them email, by calling some really important people, because that hey, this person is going to be really important for me from a deal win standpoint or getting business standpoint. So we just need to bucket people into knowing that, hey, I will because you'll have limited bandwidth today, right? You'll be only able to, let's say, call up 10 people every day. You'll be able to only send 50 emails, or you'll be only able to personalize emails to so many people. So because you will only be able to do things so much, it's about prioritizing, putting people into different buckets, and continue to keep them warm. And how do we keep them warm? Is continue to add more and more value to them. So you are in BFSI. How do you continue to do that? I mean, it's all about that. I was in BFSI selling before LinkedIn, and that's how I used to just be in touch in terms of, hey, we launch a new product, we launch new feature. This is how we're going to solve the problem that we were discussing last time. Continue to get them interested. Continue to be top of the mind for them. That is one thing that I keep doing. And that's the philosophy that I sort of lead with in the follow-up. I continue to evaluate the best way to use ChatGPT because it has so much and it continues to evolve, right? But I use ChatGPT a lot in terms of um, how do I build if I'm doing cold outreaches. I use ChatGPT's help in terms of fine tuning my email or figuring out some of the things that I'm not aware about. So I talked about pestle framework, right? Maybe that's something that you can go put on ChatGPT that, hey, can you explain what pestle framework and how can I use it in my research? And ChatGPT will sort of help you giving that information. So while I continue to Google a lot of things, I use a lot of these generative AI platform as well to try and get all of this information in terms of how can I go about things, right? So for any part of the sales process, if you want to understand, you are prospecting in a specific way today, but you can go and ask this to ChatGPT. That hey, how do I prospect into a company which is into telecom industry? See what sort of information that it's giving you, and are there some insight that you do not use personally today, and then you'll be able to use, right? So uh, like I continue to use it in like on a daily basis in different ways. What I would largely recommend is whatever you do on a daily basis, right? You can just try and post some of those questions to ChatGPT and figure out are there a different approach or a better approach to do things, right? Like I'm saying, I use it for my cold outreaches, use it for how do I send follow-up emails, right? Get some ideas from there and then try and build like get my thought process around something and then frame that email in mail or my cold call that I'm going to do to somebody. So I use it for that. I use it for. So I recently had an accident, and I'm still at home for last 45 days. I use ChatGPT to understand that hey, how do I use this 45 days since I can't go out? How do I continue to learn? How do I continue to keep myself calm at home? So I just don't use it for my professional use, but at a personal usage. How do I build um, like strength? Like I broke my leg, so I asked about what are the ways that I can continue to uh, build strength for my leg and stuff like that. So I don't just restrict it for a specific thing, but I've then again used this as a muscle. Like for everything we do, Google. I also sort of ask question to ChatGPT and try and understand how does it help or what does it have to tell me, which I don't know today.